of progress. The 3 T's that we want to talk about. This is not comprehensive, and we're going to kind of bullet point it so that we have a lot of time for discussion at the end. Okay, so the 3 T's that we're going to talk about are tone, training, and truth. Okay, tone, training, and truth. So look in Galatians 5 with me. Galatians 5 verse 19, it's a passage that we're all relatively familiar with. It reads, the acts of, 22. I got the wrong one. The acts of the flesh are obvious. Yeah, we're getting down to the nitty gritty right away.
This one a different direction.
Wrong verse. 5:22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is setting a spiritual tone in our home. Now, I know what you're thinking. I would love it if my children were peaceful, patient, kind. Amen, Rich. Get us to that point, right? But it starts with us as parents setting the tone of our home, setting a spiritual tone in our home, that these are the attributes, these are the characteristics that we want to define our home.
And
so essentially, we're going to really quickly hit this point, but I cannot understate how important this is. Number one, your children, who they will become, starts and is most importantly hinged on what you choose about your relationship with God. Your authentic discipleship will be the tone of your home. It will be the air that they breathe.
Yeah.
In the same way, you may try to supplement oxygen. You can't replace oxygen. Okay.
When Rich and I first got married, we didn't have kids yet, and we were working with teen ministry in Florida. And we worked with a lot of kids from a lot of different families in the church. And one of the things that we realized working with families, the kids that had the hardest time in those years where they were trying to develop their own faith, make decisions about their own discipleship, the ones that had the hardest time were those whose parents were not living it at home. They were coming to church, but discipleship wasn't happening at home. And for those kids, it was really challenging for them. And we made a decision at that point. We don't want to do, we want to be authentic at home. Like, we want to pass on genuine discipleship.
Yeah. And so this is the 101 basics. This is discipleship. This is love for God. Are you spending time with God? Do your kids see you spending time with God? Okay. Commitment to the body of Christ. We chose. I'm going to say some things that some people may find offensive or whatever. We chose our kids would always be at church. That included midweek. I understand it's a little bit later weeknight. I get what tired kids are. I know. I dealt with it for 18 years. You know what I mean? We chose our kids were going to understand, not by our words, but by our actions, that we seek first the kingdom. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so I get there's all kinds of, please hear me out, talk about it. But I'm telling you what we did and the commitments we made and how we were going to set a spiritual tone in our home that our kids have commented made a difference. Okay. Other things, Deuteronomy 6 talks about, God gives them the law and he says, impress these on your children, talk about them as you go. We were committed to family devotionals. We had weekly times, as weekly as it could be. I understand life happens, but we really strove to have weekly times where from the time our kids were 6 months old, 8 months old, we started having family devotionals. I cannot tell you how many times I've patted the Bible. It's a little song. Oh, we love to pat the Bible. Hey man, that's where we started. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so from the get-go, our family was going to be a place where we gathered and we talked about and worshiped God together. Does that make sense?
Can I say one thing
Absolutely.
about that? So when it started, we basically there's a really great CD that we use down in Kingdom Kids that's the Kingdom Kids CD. Track 1 on that CD is the creation song. It's literally the creation song. So all the kid, we give
day one, God made light when there was
so we had
no-
the little props, and that's literally the extent of family devotional was we sang the creation song. And that's about the attention span they had. And then we
kids loved it.
they
Dance
super
around
loved
with the little prop stars and whatever.
Yeah. You want me to share about
Yeah.
these?
Oh yeah.
And then it progressed as they got older. We had Rich was really great about this, doing creative ones. We had a time where we would do a lot of Dora the Explorer kind of family devotionals, and they do like 3 like Dora, it's always like 3 steps, and then we did it. And so Family Devo, there'd be, these different things. Then as they got a little older, we did a lot of devotionals from the Jesus Storybook Bible. That's a really fantastic.
I learned stuff from it.
Yeah, it's really, really well done. So we did ones from that. Then when they got into middle school, we did on the drive to school a Proverbs and prayer, and it was just every day. And whoever was carpooling with us was a part of the devotional in the morning. It didn't matter who they were; it's just what we did. And to be able to impress that kind of daily time, and then now they're teens. It's kind of funny. We're actually now like transitioning to even a different. But once they hit their teen years, we started using Saturday mornings more than like a family devotional. We each would take one kid and do a quiet time, like my week with Mia, Rich's week with Kiara. We'd have a quiet time together Sunday and Saturday morning. Then we would flip flop. And sorry, I'm not tall and I can't see. And now it's really interesting because they want to use their Saturdays to have their own quiet times or to FaceTime quiet times with people from camp and all that, which is like awesome. So we're figuring, now we're having kind of like different family devotionals on actually like we have conversations about all kinds of like controversial issues and like things they're facing. Those are family devotionals now, but it has evolved through the years, but it stayed that spiritual tone. We've really tried to fight to keep that a constant.
The other things we would do is we do at dinners, we do dinners together, and we do high point, low point, and God moment. Because we wanted she came up with this idea. It's amazing. We want our kids to recognize God all the time. When they're little, it's like, oh, look at what God created. Look at the star, and that's exactly impressing on them. Those are the conversations. As they get older, though, continuing to train them that God is all over the place. God is always working. And so at dinner, we do high point, low point, God moment, and everybody shares. And it's so cool to hear. Oftentimes the girls will be like, I'll go first. And the first thing they'll share is their God moment.
Yeah, how they saw God.
Yeah. And so that's another one that we do.
That you want me to talk about this? Prayers before bed. Probably a lot of us do this. This was a big one, and really especially important, I feel like, for Rich to do this with the girls. Like we both would, but like he actually still to this day has like a thing that he does with each of the girls before they go to bed. Like he says this thing to them, and it's like super special. And I mean, Kara's graduating, he still literally tells her this every night. But the prayers before bed that we would pray with them is that they'd grow up to love God and become a disciple, that the two of them would always be best friends, and that they would go on to marry strong disciples. And that was just every night praying this together with them.
Yeah. Those are the big ones. We talked about that. So I guess the thought is, does spiritual conversation come easy in your home? Like, do your kids hear you guys talking about your quiet times together and encouraging each other with things? Is it kind of permeate home? It's funny because when Kiara was probably kindergarten age, maybe a little older, she made a sign and hung it up on our lamp. It said, House of Peace. Unprompted. Like, I don't even know where it came from. Like, it was just that, like, she just made this sign with little stars on it or whatever and hung it. You remember that? And it said House of Peace for our house. I thought, oh, that's cool. Like, this is what the Spirit produces when we commit to this. Then the Spirit brings about love and joy and peace and patience. Is that the tone of your home? I understand with little ones, it's havoc and mayhem and battles. And I'm not, do you know what I mean? But like, we have to go after setting that tone in our home, regardless of what's going on with the kids. Does that make sense? Anything else you?
No, just these parts. Can you talk about that?
Which one? Is it warm in your home? Like warmth, love, connection? Is that the defining part of your home? Do your kids feel close? I think a big one that I hear a lot with parents is what people say about their kids in front of their kids. There's a culture where it's really kind of cool to talk about how sassy your kid is, or my kid is so bad, like, you know, and in front of the child. And I'm like, well, if you're going to say that in front of the child, guess what they're going to aspire to, you know? And I think, do you speak kind, encouraging, faithful words into your children about who they are and who they're going to become, those kind of things. And then is it fun to be a part of your house? Yeah. Like Christian home should be the biggest party ever. We have music playing, we dance, we laugh like crazy. It should be so stinking fun to be a part of our families. Amen. Yeah. So that's the tone. Okay. Any questions about tone before we move on? All right. We'll get to the part that everybody really wants to know about. Let's talk about training. Look over in Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22, verse 15. It reads, "Folly is bound up in the heart of a child." Can I get an amen? Let's just start right there. Yes. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child. We made the decision very early on that we expect our kids to do absolutely nothing right without us teaching them how to do it. Because what's bound up in the heart of a child? Folly. What are they going to be inclined to all of the time? Yeah. Folly. It's our job to teach them wisdom. It's our job to train them. And so we made the decision, we expect our kids to do nothing without being taught. Now, this is very countercultural. We live in a culture where it's almost like, oh, parents, you have to be hands off and let your kids figure everything out. Okay, really? Go ahead, go with that. We'll see how that turns out. According to scripture, that's a terrible idea. Yeah. Like it's our role, it's our job to teach them and train them and guide them. And so we teach them everything. We did this a lot in our family devotionals. We taught them how to do everything, starting with how to say please and thank you. We had whole family devotionals. Let's talk about this. Go ahead, say please. And then they practice doing it the right way, doing it the wrong way, how to say thank you. Oh, yeah. Do you want to talk about some others?
Just down the list? Yeah. I mean, we talked about how to be gentle. And again, they love playing the wrong way for all these, and then, being able to turn. Because
you'd say, okay, show me gentle. And they do that. Okay, now show me not gentle. They get to act crazy and all this stuff. But it gives them a safe forum to begin to understand those concepts.
Yep. We taught them how to greet people, how to look someone in the eyes. As they got older, it's interesting, we trained different things. We trained them how to communicate their emotions. We tried to teach them it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. There is a way to communicate those emotions that is appropriate and respectful.
We did there. Yeah. So we did a balloon one where we would blow up a balloon. And then okay, let's say you feel sad, but you don't talk about it. Let's say you feel angry and don't talk about it. And we blow up the balloon to where it popped. And we talked about this is what happens when you don't learn to deal with emotions appropriately. And so they loved it because they're sitting there waiting for the balloon to pop and freaking out, and they all get to freak out. So you make these concepts really fun and memorable, and they become it's a way to train them. Yeah. Oh, friends are like a root beer float. That's an iconic one in our family about how to choose friends.
Yep. That was a big one. We trained them how to disagree with us. I mean, as they got older, they disagreed with us a lot and, didn't want to do things the way that we said or what we said. And so we had to train them. It is okay to think something different than us or to not agree, this is how you communicate that. We had to teach them that.
Can I say something about that real quick? Because I think this speaks to one of the questions people have about how do you get your kids to obey, but to still be able to kind of be themselves and express themselves. So here's what we did. Anytime things were getting a little hairy, if you would, and we all know what a little hairy looks like, we would stop and we would tell our child, come here, look me in the eyes. And we would get down on their level, but we would make them look us in the eyes. And we would say, okay, you know the expectation in our home. We'll get to that part. What happens if you continue down this course of action? We start talking through it. But they knew at that moment, if they had a question, they could say, hey, can I ask a question? Daddy, can I ask a question? Yeah.
Yes.
You said the other day that if I did this, it would go this way. And now you're saying this. And I'm like, you know what? You're right, actually. I'm wrong in this situation.
Yeah.
But we taught them it is always okay to ask questions or to say, can I do this instead or whatever? You can reason with us. You cannot be defiant. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I know that's one of the questions that we'll talk a little bit more as we're talking about obedience, but it came up. How do we communicate with our kids in such a way that it's okay for them to have their own thoughts and opinions, but like talk about it?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
One thing with that, I will say one of the first battles that we fought was just the look me in the eyes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I'm like, look me in the eyes. And I'm holding the face and it's like, look me in the eyes. Okay, awesome. We did, like, I haven't even gotten to what you're getting spanked for, the actual thing you did. You're getting disciplined, which we're going to get to, but like, this is just look me in that. We're step one.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now you look me at, now we're going to deal with like the thing that actually happened. But the look me in the eyes battle was real and super important for us to train.
Don't lose that battle.
Yeah.
Don't lose that battle.
Yeah.
Okay.
We trained them to obey the first time.
Yep.
And I learned this from my mom. She would tell us, how many times did God tell Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree? One time. How many times am I going to tell you to do something? One time. Obey the first time. There was no counting to 10. It was, I said it.
Yep.
And we expected the first time. We had to teach one of
our. To
our.
be clear, can I say that?
Yeah,
say something about that. It didn't always happen the first time. I don't want you to picture our kids like, wow, the Bartoli household, they said, pick up your clothes. And like, dude, we understand there's like, okay, we've said this, you know what the expectation is. Like we would talk them through it. I don't want you to think like our kids always obeyed the first time.
But that was our expectation.
But we held the expectation there and we kept calling them to that expectation.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. We had to train them how to do more than one thing at a time. Our youngest, love her heart, she could not figure out how to do more than like a 2 or 3 step something she couldn't do. And so actually the Dora devotionals were super helpful because how many things does Dora always have to do? It's 3. So we would like practice. Okay, we want you to do this and then this and this. Okay, what are you going to do? I'm going to do this and this and this. Okay, now go do this, this, and this, and then come back. We would have to train how to like follow more than one thing.
Yeah.
We had to train being responsible, picking, them for themselves, picking up after themselves. And I would say the 2 like top training things were obeying the first time and lying. Lying was like a no-go. When that came on the scene, we handled that really quickly because that just destroys character.
They knew that was like unacceptable. You were being disciplined. There's not we'll talk about it, but there's
You're not getting out of this.
There will always be discipline for that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the thing that I wanted to say is kids are trainable.
Yes.
And we have to believe that they're trainable.
Yes.
It's really easy when you're in the throes of it to feel like they are not. And it's really interesting. I'm, in the classroom, I'm seeing this in the classroom. I mean, the start of the year, I had this one little girl, every time she opened her mouth, it is just whining. And I was like, listen, we don't do that here. I don't speak Chinese. I can understand what you're saying. You walk that back and let's try it again. And I will tell you, this week I was having a conversation with her and I was like, you know what? She really doesn't whine anymore. My third grader, of who I have no idea what her home life is, but she has been trained in this class. We don't speak Chinese. I'm going to speak without whining, and it's going to go up. Kids are really trainable, and we have to believe that God gave us this role and that it works, that we can do it.
Which leads really well into our next point. Look in Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Not only did we train behaviors, but we trained the expectation that would go with those behaviors. Okay. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 7, it reads, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." This verse was pretty much the defining guide of our parenting. Everything in our parenting came down to blessings for obedience and curses for disobedience, putting it Old Testament. Or in this one, you reap what you sow. If you sow to please the Spirit, good comes. If you sow to please the flesh, bad comes. And so we made everything about choices. So something like that with whining. Our kids knew from the time they were little, you will never get anything from us that you ask for when you're whining. Nope, sorry. I mean, you get to choose what tone do you want to use.
Yeah.
And we trained the whining tone versus respectful. We taught them that, but we never gave in. They never got anything they whined about. It was like so our kids learned that doesn't work. And guess what? They learned how to speak respectfully. Why? Because they really wanted whatever they were asking for.
Yeah.
You're perfectly capable of speaking respectfully. But if I, as a parent, give in and I give them what they're whining about, guess what? I've now reinforced that's what works. Yeah. Does that make sense? So with all these things, we trained the behavior and the expectation. And so this is where discipline begins to come in, where we taught them that if they did things right, there were blessings. And as a parent, we're supposed to transition now.
Well, no, this is important though.
So this is where we're going to transition to the third point. So basically, this is where truth comes in. Once you've trained the behavior and you've laid out the expectations, you have to deal with truth, which is, are they actually doing it? And this is the $1 million question that everybody showed up for. How do I get my kids to do the things that I'm expecting of them?
Yeah.
Well, I would say first you got to back up and check your tone, check your training, but then ultimately laying out clear expectations of how you are going to reward the behavior when they do it right and discipline the behavior when they don't do it right. Is that what you want to say?
No, I thought you were going to say that. Basically, this is huge in parenting. Sometimes it's easy for parenting to be about getting them to not do what gets on our nerve, like just stop because you're driving me crazy. Parenting is so much
That's real.
bigger.
That's like,
it's real.
We're not above that.
I know. And I felt that many times, but it's so much bigger than that. We are trying to instill this framework for life. I mean, this Galatians 6, that's how life works. Like you reap what you sow, and we get this opportunity to build character in them, that it isn't about just do what I say and leave me alone. It is about we are helping them build character.
Yeah. What did you want me to say there? I don't see that.
No, that was it. I said it.
You did great. Okay. Okay. So the second part of Proverbs 22:15 that we didn't read, folly is bound up in the heart of the child, but the rod of discipline drives it out. So as parents, we have to embrace it as our role to bring the rod of discipline into our children's life. Now, I know, again, I'm going to step on toes. This is going to hurt people's feelings or sensibilities. I'm just telling you what we did. Okay. A rod is painful. And so you have to own as a parent, it's your job to bring pain into your child's life that is going to help them learn the right consequences to the decisions they make. Okay. We spanked our children. Okay. And I know people have different feelings about that and all that kind of stuff. What I want to say about this is, when I say we spanked our children, we never, and I'll say this with all confidence and integrity, we never spanked our child out of anger, frustration, or losing our temper. Never spanked our child out of anger, frustration, or losing our temper. It was always a clear conversation and the consequence for the decision that they were making. Now, as a parent, this is where we get into our own emotional regulation. Like, we as parents have to be able to step out of the situation, take a deep breath. Sometimes we would have to be allies and be like, okay, you seem a little caught up in the situation. How about I take on this part, you know what I mean? And work together. But it's where I'm going to step out and not make this about how this is affecting me, and make it about my role as a parent to really train my child what happens if they continue in this course of action. Okay. And so, so a great passage about emotional regulation is Ephesians 6:4. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. That idea is to make them angry alongside of you. Okay. It can't just be we're frustrated, they're frustrating us, and now it's this big hot mess and I'm going to start swinging. I am 0% a proponent of that. That is wrong. It's sinful. That is not what I'm talking about when I say spanking. Okay. I will explain to you what we did for spanking. Okay. Again, Rich. Oh yeah. So the reason I know this to be the case is because I grew up in a household without clear expectations. And ultimately what it meant was, if you got on dad and mom's nerves enough, fisticuffs were flying. Maybe not fists, but slaps and backhands. And you know what I mean? So I have many memories of sitting in the car, messing with my siblings and getting on each other's nerve, being kids, and the parents saying, stop, and no, stop. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just hands flying and get slapped in the face and pinned against the windows and just literally just, you know what I mean? I am not that is not what I am talking about. Okay. I know what that does, and it did in me was it produced a level of insecurity where I'm not exactly sure what the rules are. The rules kind of depend on how much they bother dad and mom. So one day I could yell at my brother and, you know, all this stuff. And as long as dad and mom are okay with it, then that's okay. But another day you do that and all Hades breaks loose. Does that make sense? I'm not talking about that at all. Okay. So what did we do? Oh,
can I share this
ahead,
before the practicals? Parenting is exhausting and there's a lot of emotions.
Amen.
And what I love about this scripture is, like, we have to process our emotions first. And my personal default emotion when they were younger was just frustration. I mean, I have so many memories of, at the end of the day, literally in my head, I'm like, you can have the house. Like, just take it. Like, I surrender. I wave the white flag. Like, it's just yours. I'm done. I mean, just so exhausted and frustrated. But in those moments, knowing if I don't do this in 5 years, what is my child going to look like? And it forced me to, like, deal in that moment. But I had to, like, process my frustration emotions. And then as they got older, and now the current default emotion is fear. They hit, like, the middle school teen years, and then it isn't frustration, it's like panic and fear. But I can't parent from frustration or fear. Neither is good. Like, that isn't helpful to my kids. And so it has forced me to deal with the things that I'm feeling, and that not be the launching point for discipline. They have to be separate.
Yeah. So do I launch into practicals now? So practicals, how do we do this? So again, you're having this, let's say, a situation where they're not obeying the first time, and you communicate, hey buddy, what's the standard? You obey the first time. You're not doing that. What happens when you don't do that? I get a spanking. If you continue down the current course of action, what's going to happen is you are going to get a spanking. So I'm giving you the choice right now. Do you want to obey, or do you want to continue to, you know what I mean? If they continue, well, then it was like a massive thing. Okay. I'd say, all right, come with me. And we would actually go to another room away from everything. It was like a complete separate incident. And then I would sit down and they would look me in the eyes, and I'd say, okay, why are you getting a spanking? Because I didn't obey the first time. What happens when you don't obey the first time? I get a spanking. So
We've had this conversation so many times.
yeah, it's burned into my brain.
Yes.
Okay. So you're getting a spanking because you did not obey the first time. Now come here. I put them on my knee. Wham. Okay. They cry. It hurts. It's painful. They cry. And then I have them stand up and I say, okay, now what do you say? And they would say, I'm sorry, Daddy. And then I would take them in my arms and I would hold them until they were completely done crying and back to being happy. Oh, I would say, I completely forgive you. And I would hold them and snatch them up and I would hold on to them.
Mhm.
I cannot tell you how many times in that moment my child changed.
Mhm.
It both drew them to me affectionately. They were like, it didn't have this thing where they would like want to be away from me. The opposite. They would like be so close. It made them feel loved and they would be a different child. And then we'd say, all right, let's try and do it again. Okay. And we go back and we give them that opportunity again and they would do it right. And we're like throwing candy at them. Parade. Here's all the candy you can eat, child, whatever. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when I say we spanked, it was never this violent, mean, outrage. That's abuse.
Mhm.
I'm talking about the rod of discipline that brings pain into my child's life to teach them
Mhm.
this is what happens if you continue to not obey,
Mhm.
and then an opportunity to do it differently.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Anything you would add to that?
No, just like when we started and.
Well, why don't you do that? You're better
Yeah.
at that.
So the same way that Family Devos, everything else, like it kind of evolves. I mean, it started around 1 year old, just with the popping on the hand, throwing food on the floor,
Mhm.
favorite pastime of like every 1 year old that I know. And mealtime was just crazy. And so it started with those smacks or the pop on the leg at diaper change. I mean, they would fight it in these like battles. And then there came the age that it was like more, like where you're able to have a conversation, like the 3-4, kind of time. And there were things, getting Kiara to stay in her toddler bed and not get out. And that was like a whole like monumental event that night at our house, or Mia and these battles with her clothes. I remember one night I was having just so many battles with her. And I remember calling my mom, all right, I'm having a battle with a 3-year-old and I'm not gonna lose. Tell me how to win. And so I'm like trying to get like input, like I've gotta win the battle. Yeah. And then spanking stopped, like it quit. It isn't effective. It has a time
Yeah, it has a
and
time
a
period.
purpose, but
Yes.
like early elementary,
Yeah.
there weren't spankings anymore. There were more natural consequences
And finding ways to bring pain into their life.
Yes.
I mean, that's what a rod
In different
does.
ways, yes.
Whether it be losing something,
Yeah.
or whatever, if it's not
Burpees.
painful,
Yeah.
it's not effective.
Yeah.
We actually instituted burpees at some point where it was like, okay, you're going to do this for every piece of clothing you leave out. You're going to get 5 burpees. Then it's not on me. Okay, there's 6 pieces. You still have to pick those up. And now you owe me 30 burpees.
That's like
sense?
currently in our house.
Yeah. Well, that started probably middle school through today. And today it's like, I mean, we say today, but they're amazing. Like we don't deal with this stuff really much at all.
Not much, but there's still
That's
still times.
That's
It's
true.
like we say, pick up after yourself, and a week later, people are not picking. Okay, no, and that's like a whole thing we can talk about when we let things slide. Like
Yes.
we just let it go. Then we have like a Come to Jesus family devotional. We have done you such a disservice, and we are so sorry. We have not held this expectation. We are teaching you to be terrible spouses and terrible roommates, and we are correcting them.
We're sorry for that.
We're
we
sorry.
apologize from the bottom of our hearts.
Yeah. But it's back to
so therefore you need to start cleaning the dishes.
In our repentance.
In our repentance, you're gonna clean.
Yes.
It's a win-win for us.
But we did crazy things, like they
love
to like halfway load their dish.
Yes.
Like bring it and set it in the sink. No, that isn't loading the dish. So we call it give me 10.
Or leave half the stuff on the table and load half of it.
So I made them one night. The dish was in the sink. I said, great, take that dish out, go back over to the table, sit down, come back over, load it into the dishwasher, and you're gonna do it 10 times. So come and load it, take it back out, go sit down.
Yeah.
9 more times. They're laughing by the end, like it's so ridiculous, but
Yeah.
we tried all kinds of
Yeah.
different, took the phone away as they got older, cut TV, like
Oh man.
you have to be really creative
Yes.
as parents, but like you can't give up. You know what I
Yes.
mean? You keep figuring out how
That's
to
it.
win.
You cannot give up. That's a great way to put it.
Oh, the other one was sending to the room. We didn't do timeouts.
Oh yes, this is good.
But as they got, I would say like elementary age, when they just have like a really stinky attitude.
Yeah.
And we're like, you know what? We are having a wonderful time out here. You are not. And you are not going to affect what we are doing out here.
The tone of our home.
The tone of our home is not going to be affected by you. You go back to your room. When you choose that you would like to be a joyful part of our family time right now, then you can come back out, but you are not staying out here like that. You're not going to rain on our parade. So we would send them to their room
To emotionally regulate.
yes, and be able to come back and
Yeah.
join.
We would tell them you can choose to be that way.
Yeah.
But you're going to choose to do it in your room,
Yes,
not ruining the tone of our home.
yes.
Does that make sense? So I'll close with two things. Well, one thing. So there's a story. Most of you guys have probably heard it. So when Kiara was about, what did we figure out? Between 3 and 4, there was a moment where she was getting out of bed and had gotten in this pattern where we would put her in bed, then she would get out and come out, and it was kind of funny. And then we put her back in bed, but it became this thing where it was like, it was not funny anymore to us. And so we had a devotional, we talked about it, we addressed it with her. Well, that night she got out of bed, and we told her in the devotional, here's what's going to happen. If you get out of bed, after we put you in bed, we are going to close your bedroom door, which to a 3-year-old is like, right? You with me? All right. And so we told her, we said, Kiara, if you get out of bed, this is what's going to happen. We are going to close the door. Okay. Sure enough, little 3-year-old Kiara comes bopping down the hallway, and we're like, buddy, what did we tell you was going to happen if you got out of bed? Oh, you're going to close the door. And as soon as she did it, she's like, no, she starts crying, and we're like, go get in bed. And so we closed the door, and she is rip roaring, screaming. Right. So then we put her in the bed, we close the door, and
She's talking to her.
well, no,
Okay.
so she's screaming and she's pulling on the door. I'm having to hold it closed from the hallway.
Yeah.
So after about, I don't know, I'm making up some time period. It was a long time ago. I forget. After a little while, she stops crying. Here's what she says. She says, she's right on the other side of the door so we can hear everything. She says, you know what? They don't always come when I scream. She said, I know what I'll try. Daddy, mommy, I'm sick. I'm sick. I'm going to throw up. I'm sick. I'm sick. A 3 to 4-year-old, this is their reasoning, guys. We think our kids don't know what they're doing. We think it's like they can't figure out how to be obedient. They can't figure this stuff out. My 3-year-old sitting on the other side of the door, reasoning with herself.
Yes.
Oh, the screaming didn't work. Let me try. I'm sick. I'm sick. And then, she calms down again and she has another little conversation with herself. She tried something else. And then eventually she went in and got in her bed. And so about a half an hour later, we go back in and check on her, and she's in her bed. She's not asleep yet. And she's in her bed. And we said, are you okay in here? She said, yeah. And so we left the door open after that, and we never dealt with that battle again. But it taught me our kids actually know what they're doing.
Yes.
And they're working us.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
We can think, oh, little Janie, they don't really know. Child, please.
Yeah.
I've been on the other side of that door.
Mm-hmm.
Your child knows exactly what they're doing to you, and they'll take attention, whether it be negative or positive.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If you're going to get negative, they're okay with that kind of attention.
Yeah.
But it's using these moments to train them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the last thing I would say is the 2 things that we committed to that are overall abiding principles are prayer and advice.
Mm-hmm.
We prayed constantly for our kids, as you do,
Mm-hmm.
but we also committed to getting tons of advice.
Mm-hmm.
We asked all the time, how do you do this? How do you do this? Here's the current situation. How would you handle this? Here's the current situation. How would you handle this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a week went by that we were not talking to people about what we were doing in our parenting. And here's the reality of both of the, oh, did you want to say something?
No, and still, I mean, they're
All right.
like, it's different questions, but as they hit the teen years, I mean, that's
man.
middle school to high school.
That may have been twice a week.
I mean, truly,
Tears.
there was not a week
brutal.
that went by. Like we just had such desperation.
Constant, yes. But here's the reality is, I don't have a proverb for this. You know the Proverbs. God blesses humility
Yeah.
even more than he blesses skill.
Mhm.
You ever notice in the book of Proverbs, it's not the person who gives advice who's called wise. It's the person who seeks and takes advice that's called wise.
Yeah.
And so we said, if we're going to do nothing else right, we are going to humble ourselves before the Lord and before people. Our house was not off limits. We were like, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think realizing that God will bless that kind of humility. And you guys are here because of that. You're
Yeah.
amazing. You're awesome. But I would really encourage you to get tons of advice about your parenting.
Mhm.
Sound good?
Mhm. I was just thinking, we were talking
I don't know
beforehand
what that
about,
is.
yeah, we were talking beforehand about like the hand-me-down clothes, like the Elliots are like, we're gonna hand down clothes. We were talking about the beauty of that. But I was thinking about that's kind of the same as advice. Like we actually get, there is a beauty of like handing down advice. Like we get to
Yes.
see people that have gone before us and like hand down what you like have learned, and we get to hand that down to other people. It really is a beautiful thing. So
Yeah. So that is all we have for you. Obviously, this is not comprehensive. We don't claim to be experts, but this is our experience and the biblical reasons why we did what we did. And so that's what we've got for today. So